Beautiful. Well, good morning, everyone. I've got kind of more discussion-based topics today, a little bit of FEP talk, and then maybe some PyHC and AI talk. Consensus is it's Monday morning. Sounds like someone's got a case of the Mondays. I know. I feel icky saying that. Um, Anywho, let's see some overall announcements. Just due to kind of the pace at which funding is moving right now. Normally we'd have a summer school this year, but we're looking at doing a winter school instead, early 2027. So get excited about that. Um, and that's really all I have from me today. Sean, do you have any overall announcement before we dig in?
Um, Maybe nothing that I'll share my screen and demo, but I can mention that um, I talked about the PyHC Actions GitHub repo that I made, like maybe last Telecon or the one before, I forgot which. But I had made a couple GitHub Actions checks that packages can use to see if they are in compliance with FEP3, like if all their dependencies are the version ranges suggested there, and if their dependencies are compatible with the PyHC environment. And the update here is I've opened PRs to the core PyHC packages to add those, and packages have been giving feedback on those PRs, which I appreciate, and a couple of them have already merged and started using them as automated checks, and that's really cool. So no one has found any like bugs in the implementation so far, so they're well made at the moment, and hoping this can eventually be rolled out more broadly to most, if not all, PyHC packages, just as a helpful little check to make meeting the standards easier. So that's all from me.
Awesome. John, would you like to take it away?
Oh boy, I don't have like much prepared. Folks saw in Slack and um, email. We've got four steps open now, which would complete the process of just taking all of our existing standards and tweaking them a little bit and bringing them into the step format and dealing with tiering and such. So we talked a lot at the fall meeting about the community and licensing, and there's some updates on that. There's a documentation one that's again very minor changes and gotten no comments on that, and then dropped out on Friday in the news you want to kill slot, I guess. Um, just the last couple dealing with packaging and development standards. Both of those are very minor changes. I think those are going to be a lot more beneficial if people can point at great examples of projects that do things well, and particularly in a way that makes it easy for people to steal. I think those things will be kind of in between standards and like best practices informational. So the more good information that we can find from through there, the best. I also did throw in the Slack and email on a couple of those some just Google polls on the changes, trying to kind of break out the ideas of the changes from the uh, text. Um, I did not put those forum links in the actual PRs because I'm a little bit afraid of putting a Google form totally publicly readable and getting 100 fake replies. Um, but yeah, that's basically it. I'm pretty sure Julie's the only one who's actually put in those forums. I'm just assuming it was her. Um, but yeah, so all of the PRs, all the forums, and this can be totally open conversation on anything that anybody wants to look at with any of those, whether that be me explaining why I'm doing something or us wrestling over something specific.
Hey, John, I did have one question looking through.
Yeah.
Ooh, camera. On the dependencies, removing the dependencies bit,
Yes. Let's have
because,
a knife fight.
well, the original language is really soft and basically says, hey, try to have the minimum number of dependencies, and your change is let's get rid of that soft recommendation and say we're not going to put any limit on dependencies people can have, even though it's not really a limit, just an advice.
Yeah, I did that partly to get people to talk. Um,
Oh, I fell into
and thanks. Yeah. And the reason for revisiting that is, as you say, it's very soft, so it's kind of hard to call it a standard. Um, and I have the impression that most of us think we have a bigger problem with duplicate functionality than with bringing in too many dependencies. And so there's a tension there, and I was afraid. I think I heard a few other people feel a fear that that was going to not be beneficial for us. So that's why I proposed striking it. Um, totally up for, we can think about rewording it. We can also think about taking similar language and dumping it down in best practices. And if we're in best practices, we can have a more nuanced thing than a standard, right?
Yeah, I could see moving it to best practices since it really isn't a requirement. Another thing is we could change it to say if you have a large number of dependencies, consider having it as a sub package
Mm.
because we don't actually talk about sub packages, but it's really nice sometimes to uh, have oh, do you want the whole fully loaded baked potato with, cloud support and AstroPi and all these other things, or do you want just the core?
Yeah. I'll chime in to add that I've been added special rules in the little FEP3 checker and stuff for like what dependencies are in the base dependency for the package versus like the optional dependencies you can install and
Mhm.
stuff. And yeah, using those is a really nice way to play nicely.
For a bit of history, I believe that the depend on as few packages as possible came from AstroPi back maybe 12 years ago, 13 years ago, something like that. And um, for Plasma Pi, we did run into some difficulty. We had a dependency which depended on um, Jupyter Notebook or something like that. And that ended up causing some dependency conflicts in the PyHC environment. So there are potential problems with that. I'm wondering about um, if like the recommendation I'd say should be more along the lines of test whether um, your package can be installed with a PyHC environment. So like do this through testing more so than
Oh,
which Sean is like on top of that. So it should be a lower lift.
I like that. That's a,
I will
you know,
comment on GitHub somehow.
um, I will throw them into the PR. Well, okay, so it's literally just like that, actually. It's number 51. But I like that because we've viewed the or at least I've viewed the PyHC environment as we have this group of packages. Sean is working to make us work together. But I think if we establish a standard of no, actually, if you're coming in now, we've got to fix that.
And we have a GitHub workflow that will do it for you.
Yeah.
Yep. And I will say it's been actually quite a long time since there's been a like true dependency conflict. I think it's been roughly a year without any package like having, say a maximum dependency that like totally excludes it from the environment. I can think of maybe one or two examples, like with NumPy when the NumPy 2 switch was happening, that that took a little bit. And then there's still two PyHC packages that don't support Python 3.12 yet, so they need to be included in there. But ever since we actually started trying to coalesce them into at least one place where they don't conflict, that's been a lot easier. And so I think it's less of an ask to say if you're coming in, try to be compatible with this thing.
Great. Progress.
Yeah, it feels like the that was the lowest hanging fruit for interoperability among our group was like you should be able to have a Python environment with all of them together. And we've at least gotten that far in however many years we've been around. Like 8.
And then, yeah, things like sub packages and optional dependencies and all that go very nicely down in the best practices once we have that standard to hang off of. I like it.
I like it.
Do we want to leave this as an exercise to the reader to fill out the forms, or do people think I'm not going to do it unless we carve a little telecon time out right now for you to look at them?
Let's do telecon time right now, like 10 minutes.
Okay,
That would be awesome. And then I can live share the answers.
Mhm.
that would be
Um,
beautiful. So that
so
also,
so let me just make sure I will just post all of these in one shot.
yes, please do
Um,
repost. For those that came a little late, we're just trying out a new way to kind of discuss FEPs that have not yet been voted on. We're not doing any votes or anything, just talking about them.
Mhm.
And John was kind enough to put together some Google Forms to kind of help guide discussion instead of forcing everyone to do the clunky GitHub chats all the time.
Yeah. And yeah, I wanted to say, because I don't think I've thanked you yet, John, for putting those together. I went through the forums on Friday and they were like short and sweet, and it's so much easier to give feedback that way than going through the actual document and like leaving a comment and stuff.
yeah, that was the hope, was just to make that a little less brutal. All right. Give me just a sec. I'm going to try to pull short links instead. Mm.
All right, since some links are been thrown in, go
There
ahead,
we go.
open those up, give your feedback. John said he'd love share some answers. Let's take about 10 minutes to do that.
Do we play Jeopardy music?
Someone play lo-fi. I'm gonna pause the recording for anyone who watches this back later. They can see our end result instead.
Yeah, that sounds like a good call.
Is my screen showing? Oh,
Yes, yes.
okay, cool. So I realize this is probably the first thing we should have done a year ago. People had asked about like why do we recommend certain licenses and such. So that was what this is kind of the statement of ideas. Um, and it looks like most of these people at least think they're reasonably good and perhaps could take some wording improvement. So definitely we can discuss wording here, but also please do throw into GitHub. But it looks like the ones that have the most contention would be, is it a priority that we'd be able to give simpler recommendations to the projects? Um, is it a priority to discourage barriers to contribution or rather to encourage contribution? Maybe that should be worded the other way around. Um, and is it a priority to accommodate projects that have unique needs? Do people want to comment on any of these? Hearing none, then let's talk. Um,
Oh, for
yeah, please.
the discourage barriers to contribution one, I'm thinking of like one person projects that are focused on a very specific thing. Those are still potentially like quite valuable parts of the ecosystem. But like beyond the scope to have to build like a contributor guide and things like that. So having some nuance in there.
Sure.
Um,
And this is
and
just in terms of selection of license.
oh, okay, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So this is the anti-NOSA clause, let's be honest.
Oh, okay. So like um open source but closed development or something like that.
Licenses that make it difficult to incorporate external contributions.
Ah, got it. In that case, my four would go to a five.
Okay.
It's a Monday morning. I'll blame everything on that for the rest of the week.
Clarify. All right. Licenses to include. All right. We've got. Actually, okay. Everybody thinks MIT should be a preferred license in BSD3 clause. Those are the biggies. Um, are there some folks who wanted to comment on Apache 2 as being a certain circumstances license?
Um, my issue with the Apache license is that the name of it, um,
Mm,
there's cultural appropriation in that, and like using the name Apache without permission from people who are Apache. Um, so that'd be my reason for not preferring it. The
I
license
re
itself, otherwise, is great.
So I
I
happen to work with a group that does use that license that uses Apache in a lot of our projects. And the issue is, I guess, the supposed patent protection because we work with stuff that could be commercialized and used in uh, yeah. So we're just trying to protect ourselves from that. Yeah, I didn't address the name. That's an excellent point. But that's just why a lot of the projects I work with in the team we use Apache. For myself, I use MIT and BSD3. Go ahead.
Yeah, and
Nick,
the issue is
I
like primarily that the Apache Software Foundation should change their name, so it's upstream.
I
Yeah.
thought that I thought that they had a conversation at some point with the Apache Nation. Let me go digging and see if I can find that.
Yeah.
Um, because I think that's an important consideration.
Yeah. And just to add to the conversation, I'll point out that a while ago I made a little table of all the licenses PyHC packages use. And Apache 2.0 is the third most popular license at 15 packages using it. BSD 3 was the second most popular at 17, and then MIT is by far the winner at 42 packages using it.
Yeah. All right. Do
Yeah,
we
my
want to talk GP?
justification for keeping Apache was because so many packages are using it and it's a good enough saying, oh, nope, sorry, you have to relicense everything can be I also know that, it can be very tough on institutions. So my
Yeah.
general, we should allow this with exception is because sometimes an institution will say, sorry, we only release under, BSD2 or you can't release kind of stuff.
Yeah, and I know NASA likes Apache, so that's sort of why it's been near the top. Can we talk GPL? We look to be evenly split on whether the GPLs should be something we prefer or forbid, or strongly discourage at least.
I'm personally curious to hear about people who want it as a preferred.
Yeah.
And I can note that three PyHC packages use GPL 3.0, and one package uses 2.0.
I can, if it's okay, I could comment on having switched away from GPL, if that's relevant.
Yes, please.
Oh, okay. So yeah, the group I work with, the same group that switched to Apache, we used to use GPL until we realized, basically thanks to the early days of PyHC and some of the predecessor work leading up to that, how that was harmful. Well, I guess that's an opinion, but we felt it was harmful to the ecosystem and too restrictive. So we actually got permission of all our co-authors and previous contributors and switched away from GPL. And again, the reason we used GPL was similar to Apache, trying to protect ourselves from other people commercializing our own work and then sort of using it against us, so to speak. Not people in our ecosystem or our research group, but like people that are sort of slightly on the edges and might want to commercialize it. So maybe it's a hypothetical issue, but yeah, we realized that we wanted to be very, not copy left, to be for the, well, I'm not going to just rehash, but the reasons that have been given in many prior discussions by this group. Over.
That's
Somebody
good
want to come
feedback.
out and
Appreciated. Yeah.
somebody want to come out in full-throated support of copyleft?
Yeah, Nick makes an intermediate point in the chat there that if package creators decide to use a copyleft license, GPL v3 would be the one to recommend over v2.
I almost feel like we should have a level, the allowed if you give a justification and allowed if you give a really strong justification.
Oh,
Yeah. But at what tier? All tiers?
well, and that was why this is fair. These certain circumstances is intentionally vague of, maybe some tiers, maybe, what have you. But certainly as written, it's I'm trying to remember if it's silver or gold that we cut out unless you provide an essay. Um,
Yeah.
but I'm surprised because I thought we had fairly strong consensus away from copyleft, but it sounds like that's just more an issue of who's been comfortable speaking up.
Yeah, I think like as long as it's a open source initiative approved license according to the open source definition, that should be acceptable for any package at all tiers. So I think keeping these as like recommendations or strong recommendations is probably for the best because some packages might come in from the past and use uh, the Python Software Foundation license. Thinking of SpacePy in particular,
Yeah.
but
And
it's
the scary thing there was we actually had to fight the lawyers to let us do that instead of BSD.
interesting.
Oh yeah.
But yeah, it's like SpacePy is an important package. There's history behind that. It should be allowed at all tiers, I would say.
Okay, so I think MIT and BSD really are still standing out as like the obvious ones. I encourage folks to take a look at the actual wording then, how that's laid out, and try to make some comments on that. Okay, other standard. Oh, let me jump forward. Everybody agrees there should be some escape hatch. Okay, so that's easy. Um, if you need to use a weird license, you write it up. So that's cool. And then it looks like the other ones, okay, open development, everybody agrees with that. So these are existing standards that, as written, basically just continue to apply to all tiers. So everybody agrees on open development. Version control, discouraging duplication, collaboration must be encouraged, and code of conduct adoption are all have support, but some suggestions for revision. So do folks want to suggest some particular revisions? And again, Yeah. All right, let's look at some other stuff. Uh, Documentation. Okay, so this is a huge one. So pretty much all of this was written as applying to all packages and thus all tiers, and everybody agrees there should be additional standards for higher tiers. So please throw comments in the PR of where you think the split should be. Everybody agrees to changing the requirement to public API, having recommendation for non-public, and requiring 257. So there's one vote against the requirement that the documentation be built from the repository and be delivered in a form available on the web. Let me find the current. Okay, so the current requirement just says the documentation must be provided in version control and be made available online in a readable form. And some of our discussion expressed some concern about that not being clear enough and making the connection between the information in the repository and something on the web that people can actually read that has to be built out of that. So that was the reason for that. So I'm not sure if this is an objection to the principle of the change or that I worded it poorly.
Yeah. Okay. So this is the this me was the reject the change because it said you have to put your documentation to HTML and I'm like, shouldn't Markdown be good enough since on most things that gets rendered?
I think yeah, I think that was the conversation was that we want to make sure it was something directly viewable in a web browser. Um,
Which, to play devil's advocate for Sandy, you can view a markdown file in a web browser when you're on a
Exactly,
fancy
but
web
saying you
provider.
have to, as it reads, I read it as you have to make your documentation HTML, but pragmatically, Markdown gets rendered perfectly when I go visit any repo.
well, but if you go and visit the repo, it in some sense that's good enough, right? It's been provided as HTML at that point. Your browser isn't rendering the markdown.
So all I was saying is we shouldn't say you have to put all your documentation in HTML. We should allow Markdown.
All right. So were you reading that, Sandy, as the documentation has to be written from the base in HTML?
Yes.
Okay. That's not the intention.
Okay. In
The,
that
the
case,
intent,
it's a
yeah, the
tweak the
intent.
wording and not a reject.
Okay. Um, yeah. So the new one says documentation must be provided in version control of the code and be built from the repository into an online format that's publicly readable and linkable. This should almost always be HTML, i.e., that publicly readable format.
I guess that it's rendered as HTML. So, right, you could write it in RST, restructured text or Markdown or whatever.
Yeah.
Just that you provide it's rendered. Yeah.
Yeah. And
Okay.
can I assume that this is, we're calling out things like read the docs? Like, would it be worth just actually calling out, e.g., read the docs, so
So
people
read the
know
docs
what we're
is
talking
actually
about?
down in best practices.
Okay, cool. So then, yeah, so then maybe just a simple word change, a bench like rendered to HTML instead of written in would
Yeah,
be sufficient.
I'll wordsmith that a bit and see if I can come up with something better now that I understand the objection. Um,
I'm
and,
fine with
and of course,
wordsmithing then, yeah.
yeah, and feel free to throw wordsmithing suggestions in as well. Um, okay. And in terms of like recommendations for projects, like what I would love to see us have is not just that, SunPy and Plasma Pi are great documentation, right? Because we know that. But, this particular thing they do really well, and this is the source file and the repository that makes it happen. And so this is what you go to pick it up and go. And so that's the kind of thing I'd like to have as much as possible of.
Hmm.
Cool. Anything else on documentation?
Yeah, I put a
All
link
right,
in
so
the chat to the
thanks.
Diataxis framework for creating software documentation, which has
Hmm.
breaks it down into like tutorials, how-to guides, understanding, explanation, and like reference. And SunPy's landing page breaks that down pretty much like that. But it's a kind of been gaining some traction for how to break down software documentation. For smaller projects, it might be a bit much. Well, no, it's still probably good there.
Well, it's in the best practices actually.
Oh, okay. That might be where I
So
learned about it
yeah,
from.
no, I think I got it from you and put it in the best practices.
Oh, wow.
But take a look at the way that's written in the best practices, and the SunPy docs are referenced specifically on that front. But if there's ways to make that shine more, please.
Awesome. Thanks.
Um, and
And
then
thank you
yeah,
for reading the standards ahead of time.
reading the ones I wrote. um, and then yeah, anything that people can think about in terms of people seem to think there should be hearing involved here. So please take a look. And is this something where the existing standards are good and we just need to be more lenient at the lower tiers, or we want to add more standards for the higher tiers?
My gut reaction is more of the former than the latter, but
I suspect, yeah. Okay. Packaging. Cool. Most of this people want to keep the change. Let's see here. Okay, somebody wants to improve the wording for requiring wheels at the gold standard.
I think that was me, and wheels should be not too bad to create nowadays anymore. Um, so I think including it like all tiers might be beneficial if it's being distributed on PyPI. Um, so those are my thoughts.
Okay. And then so I had an objection to the condo change. So I think before we had recommended conda just kind of vaguely. The new one requires conda forward specifically at gold and otherwise recommends. Does the objector wish to make themselves known?
Yeah, that was me. Um, so my reasoning for that is just because it's sort of transitive requirement. All your dependencies also have to be on Conda. So
Mm,
into a situation where somebody like 3 levels deep in your dependency tree adds something that's not on Conda, and then um, so I have to choose between, getting kicked out of a tier or taking on the responsibility of maintaining somebody else's package on Conda.
yeah.
I'm really glad you brought this up, Jim, because yeah, this is the exact problem I've run into actually trying to add a package to Conda. So I think it would be smart to just add like a parenthetical or something in the FEP to just say like unless what's the term, transitive dependencies block you from being in Conda.
Mm.
Unless that becomes too messy or hard to enforce. I don't know.
I mean, in theory, the same thing could be said for PyPy, right? It's just that not being on PyPy is
I've never hit
conceivable.
that problem in practice, so maybe it's just a
Yeah.
what happens in the real world kind of thing. Um, Remind me, are there any steps you can do? Like, if you want to add your package to Conda, but a dependency you have is not in Conda, is there anything you can do about that, or is it kind of just you would have to like go lead the charge to put the dependency in Conda somehow?
Yeah.
I've been told it's possible to uh, add a project to Conda even if you're not um, like the project
The
owner.
maintainer, I've heard that too. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. You can submit the recipe, but then as Jim says, that's you're taking on work for other people then.
Hmm.
I think it's a really good point, Joe. And I think it's a question of whether, like, I know there's a strong push for Conda, but it's not clear the ecosystem is necessarily there. Um, how do people feel about switching specifically to talk about Conda Forge instead of Conda more generically?
I mean, that'd be fine. I personally read them pretty interchangeably, so I feel like even if we did make that change in the documentation, I probably might not even notice. I might just substitute that in for generic conda, so I don't see a reason why not to be more specific.
Yeah, we should specify Conda Forge because that's the one where things are publicly available from, and the Conda default repository, you have to buy
Yeah.
license stuff. So
Hmm.
specifying Conda Forge um, is important, or
Okay.
it should be like highly recommended. But there might be some projects that want to create their own default channel or their own Conda channel.
Does this go back to that issue that came up a couple of years ago where like folks at NASA had issues with using Anaconda or Miniconda? Maybe that's separate. The repository is a separate issue from the distribution software. Like there was a licensing
Yeah,
issue, like, yep.
exactly. That they're able to use the Conda distribution software, but the default Conda channel um, is not available to them.
Okay.
So basically, Anaconda proper is Red Hat, and Conda Forge is Fedora. Terrible analogy, but
Okay, very good.
But it's
okay.
not just the repos even, it's even the software. I can't use the Anaconda software even if I only ever install Conda Forge stuff. I can't I can't do that
Well,
without paying licenses.
no,
So
that's did they change that?
if they find Anaconda or Miniconda on your computer, you're billed, regardless of whether you have any software installed with it.
Miniconda
So
and Conda are open source,
I
so
realize that, but NASA's taken an approach to nope, it doesn't work. You gotta buy a license to do it that way.
Great Caesar's Ghost.
So anyway,
okay,
it just yeah.
Yeah. I do exclusively PyPI myself, but I know I'm a little out of date maybe, but I use PyProject.toml and PyPI and
yeah.
the build, I guess, Python-m build,
Yeah.
which uses Twine. Yep.
And that's why I switched to Micro Mamba because it doesn't have the word conda in it at all. And so it won't flag their filters.
Oh,
The hoops you jump through.
okay. So so NASA's making this harder on us again. Okay, that's good to know. But
Yeah, that's where we want to just have it. Yep, that we're not blocking because there could be other agencies as well. Just NASA was the one that I had heard of. I think 1 or 2 years
yeah,
ago.
well, and supposedly just using the right channel fixed that, but apparently not. Okay. Uh, I will summarize this conversation as best I can in the issue, and we'll try to figure out a way to hack out of it. But it sounds like we've got enough concerns that's going to be hard to make Conda requirement. All right. Okay, so I had two chains of requiring support rather than striving for support. And Nick, can you throw that comment in the actually no, I'm just gonna no, yeah, can you throw that comment in the GitHub? Because otherwise I know I will lose it. Okay, so there's a note that if the standard says common OSs, we need to actually list that, and it's the same with the architectures. Um, and so the way this is written right now is you must support common operating systems and you must support the common architectures. And it lists examples of those, but the examples are not actually part of the standard. And so it's a standard that's not actually enforceable, which I agree with. I wrote it vaguely because I was thinking about the fact that, 8 years ago, if you were packaging for Mac, you were targeting Intel, and that was fine. And 3 years ago, you really need to have both Intel and ARM. And today, if you're targeting ARM, you're doing fine. And so I was hoping to do this in such a way that didn't require an updated standard when that sort of thing happens. But
In
maybe
that
that's
case,
not.
suggest rather than require would do it. The problem is if you require, you have to actually say what it is. But if you suggest supporting the architectures, e.g., then
Oh, I mean, you're absolutely right, Sandy. I just I feel very weird about the idea of having something in gold that only supports Windows.
well, we can tier it as well. At gold,
Well,
you
that
have to support Windows, Mac, Linux, and ARM or something.
yeah, and maybe we just accept that we're going to have to revise this standard when common platforms change.
The tiering comment is actually mine, so Sandy already just touched upon my suggestion.
So we list explicitly, but make it a gold.
I think
That
my
works.
muted.
Yeah, usually, I mean, for most packages, it's just the operating system is more important. The CPU architecture is more relevant when you're dealing with compiled code, like larger packages or more complex packages that might have compiled code. And yeah, I'll just say briefly, like, in my opinion, since 2024, the Windows ARM laptops are really good. I have like a high-end Windows ARM laptop or higher end, and it's awesome. And it's 1/3 the cost of the equivalent MacBook and just about as powerful or close to as powerful. A little bit bulkier, but I'm just saying we're going to be having Windows ARM stuff come to the forefront soon for Windows users.
Yeah, that was another thing I had in mind. Okay, so I will rewrite that to be a should support common architectures and OSs. Gold must support Linux, Mac, Windows, some combination of ARM and x86. I'm not sure if we want to require Windows ARM just yet, but we can double back on that. Cool. Well, that's time, and I have writing assignments.
Yeah, thank you so much, John. And if you want to do like a writing party or co-working session, feel free to reach out and we can set something up.
Ooh,
Because
thank you.
that's the main way of being able to get me to work on stuff these years.
I understand. Okay, so which one was it? Nick, did you get your dependency comment into GitHub, or do I need to find a place to put that?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Awesome. Yeah, thanks everyone for this. I hope that's super helpful for you, John, in moving this forward.
It is. It really is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This was an excellent idea. Good thought thinking of Google Forms.
100%.
And thanks, folks, for digging into this.
Yeah, literally the
These are
least I can do.
these are really only useful if they're capturing what people really want.
Hmm.
Agreed.
Bye
That is what
now.
the FEP is meant to be. All
Yeah.
right. Well, we're at time. We didn't chat, kind of AI best practices or PyHC's thoughts on that. So maybe we can just make that what we talk about next time instead.
Yeah, I can talk about that a little bit. I don't have time to fill a full hour on that the next time, but
That's
actually,
hopefully
if
it'll
people get into a heat, maybe I won't say that actually, because we might end up in a heated debate that might take a while to resolve. But yeah, I had some stuff prepared to chat about, so we could call that a next time topic.
awesome. I suggest that to everyone else who's interested in AI and has thoughts, come with your thoughts prepared and also say them. So,
Hmm.
all right. Thanks everyone. Same time, same place. 2 weeks.